Hey everybody, I'm Laurie Rudiman. Welcome to Corporate Drinker, a punk rock HR production. In each episode, Corporate Drinker explores the intricate ties between work culture and alcohol. Now, there's no judgment here. The podcast tells stories of regular people like you and me who may have complicated relationships with drinking. I'll talk to leadership gurus, therapists, addiction specialists, and even HR and marketing professionals who have hot takes on how and why alcohol and work have become so interconnected. And of course, I'll speak to brilliant people with big ideas on cultivating genuine cultures of inclusion and belonging so leaders and employees can enhance their work environment and reduce unnecessary conflict with or without alcohol. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Dr. Scott Kellogg. He's a clinical psychologist and addiction expert who has an interesting take on the world of addiction, identity, and the personal management of our lives. I found this conversation to be fascinating because we really bring in some theories of psychology into the practical management of how we meet people where they are in all stages of addiction. So if you're looking for something a little headier, a little more esoteric, but also a little bit more helpful than what you get from normal conversations about alcohol use disorder, well, sit back and enjoy this conversation with Dr. Scott Kellogg.
I'm Scott Kellogg. I'm a clinical psychologist. I live in New York City. I'm actually currently the president of the Division on Addictions of the New York State Psychological Association. When I started graduate school in the mid-1980s, and at the time I was working with homeless people in New York City. And at that time, the narrative was, and I think we all accepted then, and homelessness was a crisis. It wasn't like a lifestyle, it was a crisis. Like this was going to go away. But it was seen as an economic, because there have been changes in the tax laws in New York City, which suddenly made it worthwhile to tear down, kind of poor buildings and build middle-class, upper-class housing. And that had not been there before. It's this unleashed, which meant all these people who were kind of marginal suddenly had no place to live. It was a sudden flooding, and it was seen as an economic, wealthy, rich versus poor. But, as you worked in that field, you began to see there were more dimensions to that. That was true for sure. But also, it's funny, this is like playing itself out in California, I think at the moment again, for that matter. But, that there was mental illness problems and there's a lot of addiction. And it became kind of a rule of thumb back then that, if somebody was homeless for more than 6 months, they probably had a problem other than homelessness. They probably had an addiction. That was kind of, I don't know if it's true, but that was kind of an idea that people. So I was doing this work, and I was in school one day, and I saw an advertisement on the wall. It said for a methadone program, and said, "We're looking for people to come. We'll train them to be drug counselors, whatever. Paid internship, and you become a counselor." Right? So I thought, well, I'm learning to be a psychotherapist, but this could be great. I could learn something. I get trained. I need some money to live and family.
Oh my God, you were leaning into your side hustle.
Right. So we'll do this. So I go down there, interview for the job, get a half-time job because I got to go to school and do stuff. And the first day I go there, they say, "Scott, we've decided to cancel the training program. Here are your cases. Good luck."
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. And I was in Chinatown. Everybody's using opiates because methadone, but it's crack cocaine meets HIV, heroin addiction, Wild West. It was, and I was really like thrown into it.
Do you have a mentor or someone who kind of held your hand?
No, I mean, I had what I would really call administrative supervisors. Is your paperwork done? That sort of stuff. But I didn't really have a teacher. Nice people, but no, but I was like, I got to figure this thing out. So in 1989, I discovered the work of Alan Marlatt, who is, for psychologists, he is the great genius of addiction psychology. Everybody builds on him. And so there's a saying in AA that, addiction is cunning, baffling, and mysterious. Alcoholism is a famous phrase, right? But what Marlatt did, so the other thing was like, you get a person in treatment and they go through treatment, they're not drinking, right? and they're not using drugs. Oh, it's a great thing. We're all celebrating. We're all very happy. But 3 months later, we're declining. They go, oh, they screwed up again. Or the therapist goes, I guess I'm just a failure. I mean, I don't know. I tried to treat this guy. Everything's be fine. Now they've fallen back, blah, blah, blah. Right? Marlatt, in his genius of Marlatt, says, let's look at what happens at that 3-month period. What is going on that everybody, and the numbers like 60, 70% go back, right? Let us look at that. And he said, what happens is not cunning, baffling, and mysterious. It's actually quite predictable. The patterns are very real and very clear. And that, and it's, high-risk situations, interpersonal stress, internal voices, there are a whole series of things that we can look at these things. They're predictable. We can train people, see the signals. We can train them if they fall back, how to get back on the thing. So this was, now this is like mainstream, but at the time this was absolutely revolutionary. And also, and this is a big battle in the field, it was a big battlefield treatment. Are people powerless over their addictions? Or are people actually capable of getting addictions under control and directing their lives? I'm in that camp, and there are basically two main paradigms, and I'm going to give you the other one, which is not the 12-step paradigm, but the empowerment paradigm. We train people, they go, and he talks about falling forward was a phrase he used, people use it now. And he goes like learning to play the piano. When you learn to play the piano or ice skate, you fall a lot, right? But over time you get better and better. So each time you screw up, you learn something. So this iterative process, you can get better at getting your drug use under control.
Wait, I want to interrupt because there's such a fear of falling, especially around addiction. It's like the stakes are so high, and even one slip up will send you down this deep descending spiral, and you'll be further than you were before, further down. Rock bottom will be a new low. Is that not true always?
I hope not.
Yeah. I don't think it is, but like I hear that, especially from that AA camp around complete and total abstinence, right?
Well, Marlatt's model can be used for complete and total abstinence. It can also be used for moderation. But whatever it is, the odds are likely that you are going to go back to use. So would it be great if people never used again? Certainly. But is that likely to happen? No. And one thing he does, which he called the abstinence violation effect, which is this guy's just genius, brilliant, was that some people will use once and then they kind of go, well, I may as well just keep going. He goes, don't do that. Stop, get help, pull out of it. Because, it's because when you have a binary kind of thing of like, either I'm absent or I've completely gone back. Because people in AA who've been, have done amazing recovery for like 10 years, have a slip, they're out they may die. They refuse to go back, right? So this model is like, no, this is the humanistic experience. Now, one of the criticisms is if you do this, you're giving people permission, so to speak, to use. Well, first of all, it's their lives, and nobody gives permission to anybody to use. It's their decision, and it's their choice. So that idea of and even AA is very smart. They go, people using drugs don't like to be told what to do. So, that's not very popular. So this was a profoundly humanistic sort of revolution in addiction treatment. And then my dissertation, I looked at how do people really recover. So that's relapse prevention. And basing on the work of other people, I said I felt that identity transformation was the core process of healing. And I looked at studied identity and different methods of recovery. People were successful, made certain identity changes. People who were not successful didn't make very good identity changes.
So wait, what's an identity change? So
I now my model now, I have sort of two identity theories here. One is, I was just working with a patient on this a few minutes ago. Initially with your corporate friends or whatever, they're going to I'm going to try to stop drinking. That's probably what most of them are doing, right? And maybe that works, and maybe that doesn't work, and maybe that probably doesn't work, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And right now we have an epidemic of women drinking wine. You probably know that.
I do. Yeah.
Fastest growing group in America for alcohol. But at some point after that experiment doesn't work, and it usually doesn't work because there's a real problem, you have to say, I need to claim an identity either as a real moderating drinker or drug user, or as a person who is in recovery. I don't use substances, or I use substances in a moderate way. And moderating means very specific guidelines. What are you using? When are you using? How often? What's your method? And any violation of that model is a serious thing. It's not like, yeah, I'm going to try and drink. That's not moderation. It's planned and structured, and you have to abide by that. And some people say, yeah, I can still get the pleasure I love from alcohol, and it works. Other people go, I hate this. It's driving me crazy. I'd rather not drink. Right?
Yeah, of course. Or that guideline triggers them to drink even more. I can see that happening, because I do have friends who are like, I'm only going to drink on the weekends, or I'm only going to drink on a Tuesday. And immediately you can see that almost triggers something in them, makes them antsy.
Well, yeah, we have different parts. This is another part of my model here, but so another part but they have to really work this stuff through. I mean, that's why it's kind of a more formal process of really engaging with. It's not like, yeah, I'm not, it's like, that's not really moderation. You've made a decision. Like you make a decision to become a vegetarian or whatever, a vegan, or you make
or a flexitarian, someone who eats meat but on a limited scale, or a pescatarian, right? You've got parameters, you've got a system at play. I see that. All right, so that's one model. Yeah.
So that's the first level of, and that's a formal decision. Most of your friends are probably not making formal decisions.
No, they're not. They're right? Just bargaining. Yeah.
Yeah. And for some, that will be successful. The long-term recovery and is that you need to develop or claim or own or reclaim identities that directly conflict with the use of substances. So that is, I'm going to be a better mother. That doesn't work with drinking alcohol. Or I'm going to become a runner. That doesn't work with, it conflicts with heavy use of cocaine. But whatever it is, and you claim these identities that are important to you, and they conflict with a lifestyle based on drugs, because drugs are also an identity. People drink with other people. They use drugs. It's changing now a little bit but there's still very social aspects to a lot of drug use. I leave these people behind. I no longer see them. I end my relationships. I move. The life change. AA is a great way. It creates a whole new identity, a recovery identity. Smart recovery can do the same thing. Moderation management can do one around moderation, from going to church or religious work, spiritual work, getting heavily into yoga. These aren't guarantees, because some people do this stuff and they also, but ultimately there's going to be a conflict. And if you're not able to create this other identity, you fundamentally will not succeed in your recovery. And there's been a lot of study on natural recovery. Actually, most people recover without any treatment at all. We never see them. And we've studied them also. And they basically use identity as their vehicle. They often churches or an opportunity, or they fall in love. A woman can save a man's life. It doesn't always work. Many women who get pregnant will stop using while they're pregnant. They may go back, but often there's an identity conflict there.
That's right.
It's a very powerful lens for understanding. Not that any of it's easy, but at least it's a map for what to do.
Yeah, that is so fascinating to me, because in my work in human resources, I don't focus on fixing work. I focus on helping people almost reclaim an identity. And I didn't quite understand that I was doing this, but really think about themselves as who they are, what they want to accomplish in the world, what their values are, what gives them meaning, what gives them purpose. And you live this amazing life and you bring that good stuff to your job. It's an outside in approach when it comes to fixing work. And it sounds like we're on a similar path, but in order to claim an identity when you're mired in addiction, you have to have hope. You have to believe in the possibility that you could be a mother, you could be a runner, you could be whatever it is you want to be. And I would imagine that many people are struggling to see themselves outside of their addictions, or at least negative self-talk. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Hi, I'm Carmen Hudson. I'm the host of the Recruiting Book Club, and we're starting our second season. I'm so excited to bring to you another set of guests of recruiters who have written books. We are excited to have some very special guests this season. We've got Shally, we've got Craig Fisher, James Ellis, and quite a few other people that we're going to bring on board to tell us about what they wrote, why they wrote it, and maybe we'll veer off into a conversation about recruiting on all types of topics and subjects that happen in our industry. So I hope you can join us. I'm excited.
So just one other thing. When people get really addicted, the number of identities they have shrinks. So it's also expansion of the number of identities that's also protective. So it's not just it's both claiming ones that contradict addiction, but it's also expanding your repertoire of identities. When you're really like, I mean, like this, when we're very, very tragic, sort of hardcore street drug using people, everybody they knew was using drugs. All they basically ever talked about was using drugs. I mean, the life had shrunk into this such, like a black hole of beingness to like nothing else, And recovery is like this expands, and like now I'm interested in politics, or I'm interested in stamp collecting, or I want to do ballet, or
yeah.
But that's when we see this kind of shrinking and growing, kind of thing. Now the question you just asked me was,
well, the question is, how do you make that leap from, because people who are mired in corporate drinking really see themselves as a project manager who's stuck in a dead end job or in a toxic, like all they think about is work, 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 work. And it's, at least in these situations that I'm thinking of, driving them to drink. How do you get someone to even believe that they have the ability to have multifaceted identities?
So at the heart of any problematic relationship with substances is always ambivalence, right? And this is what we play relentlessly. There's a part that wants to use, and there's a part that's suffering, and you have to keep throwing them against each other in the session. So I might say, if you were a patient, I might say to you, so right now you've been nodding your head about all these good things I'm saying to you, but I want you to move over, that chair over, and I want you to speak to the part that says, Dr. Kellogg, I don't believe anything you're saying. I want to get high. You don't understand my stress. You don't understand my pain. You don't understand my life. I hate this fucking stuff, and I want, excuse my French, and I want to drink, or I want to smoke, or I want to do this. And then I go back to this side, and this part say, you are freaking me out. I'm going to lose everything because of you. And we want to create a civil war within the person.
Well, it contains civil war, a civil war, right? Or can it be disruptive?
It can be disruptive in the session. I mean, it's like, because both sides are quite frightened, really. One side is fearful because it uses pain at the heart of the drug use. How can I live? I'm so depressed, or you don't know, run me ghosts of traumas, you don't know what's going on. You have no idea how much pain is in me. You're taking away my medicine. Right? And the other part's going, I can see where this is going. My life, I'm going to lose everything, the family, the kids, the house, everything because of this. And also, I was not put in this world to be this person. This is not my story. I refuse to accept this as my story. This can't be my truth. So that's, you want, and the more intensity you get, the more you get to a creative possibility.
And so what are the possibilities? You have someone who's grappling with both sides of the equation. Where does that go?
All right. So, I decided the equation, I have somebody in the middle, what I call the leader in the middle, is going to figure this out, right? So you set me up like a softball.
I'm doing my job right.
Right. So there are basically 6 ways you could approach this with patients, right? And nice chapter for your book, right? 6 things.
I love it. There you go. It's technically your work, so it's not going to be in my book like that.
But it's like, and we do different things. People do multiple steps probably. But the first one is just like, well, just talk about it. Just keep coming back and talking. You don't have to do anything. Just keep talking. Come in here and talk, and let's maybe let these sides play it out. But engage in the conversation. Very low. You probably know stages of change. You probably have come across that, right? So, maybe it's a contemplation model, or even well, these people are in conflict. Those would probably be having the conversation, right? So just keep meeting and talking, and there's a thing, there's a whole thing in harm reduction dogma about having no agenda, but that's never true. We always have an agenda for patients. We're healers. We get better. But you can act like you don't have an agenda. That's useful. Like, all right, just here to talk, and we keep talking. Maybe something good will happen. We're building a relationship, and relationship is the foundation of therapy. Probably the same in HR. If you have a good relationship, things can happen. If you don't, but nothing's going to happen.
Relationships are the foundation of life. So yeah, for sure.
The next one would be, let's just monitor your use. Let's just keep track. There are apps, or you just use a piece of paper, or whatever you want to do. You make it very low threshold. Some of the apps are fun, just monitor how much you're using, when you used, but make it really light, not detailed, not onerous. And we know from behavioral research that monitoring itself tends to reduce use, right? But even if it doesn't, like, and take it apart. So you use on Thursday, where were you? Microanalysis, who were you with? Is it always the same pattern? If they're different drugs, actually, I use this drugs with these people, this one with this person, I use this by myself. You get there's a kind of a funny thing I've seen with some people, like if they have like guys, like if they have like 6 drinks or 8 drinks, then they use cocaine. But not if they have 4 drinks.
Right.
One guy would I have like 8 drinks, and then I smoke a cigarette, which I don't usually smoke, and then I what? then it's cocaine. Cigarette becomes the gateway drug to who knows?
I mean, that's interesting compulsions right there. It's like a layered in interesting ways. When you talked about like breaking down where they've been, where they're using, where they're drinking, it almost gave me a mental map that you can start to play with. Like if you are at this bar at this time of day, you know there's going to be trouble, right? So you can start to, I guess, grow and modify your behavior at least.
Right. You're getting a little bit ahead of me. But
sorry. Yeah, please. I don't mean to. Yeah.
No. I mean, so when you create a plan, then you're going to use that information to figure out the plan. But right now, the next one for me is if a person's like drinking like 35 drinks a week or something like that, I'd say I want to set a number that's very, very high. Like 35 drinks a week, which is ridiculous. And I want us to agree to that number, so easy. I want success. Everything's got to be really, really easy to accomplish. But if you go over 35 drinks, that is a big deal. And Marlatt in his book quotes a Zen saying, which is to keep the sheep happy, have a big field. That was great. So I use that idea, right? So we want to, you can do all this stuff, but there is going to be a line somewhere, and because there's no line for people, right? There's no boundary on the drinking. It's free flow. So now we're creating a boundary. But
and the bar is low, so people can meet that. I see that. Yeah.
And if they can't meet it, then that's also, you get a lot of information about what's going on there. The next thing would be, now let's move to more formally to harm reduction, which is my friend Andrew Tcharski. You should talk to him, by the way. Is he would say, ideal use plan. How do we maximize the benefits and minimize the risks? So, it's also called substance use management. So, I'm, part of me wants to use, and part of me is worried about the use. Okay, so let's look at what drugs you're using. Do you want to change the amount of the drugs? Do you want to change the combination of the drugs? Do you want to change which drugs you're using? Where are you using it? By yourself, with other people? And now with all these overdoses, a lot of people are using by themselves, trying to get them actually used with other people, because by themselves is very risky. And using, 7 days a week, can we move to 6 days a week? Would that be better? So you're changing the pattern in very kind of big, but the person decides everything. It's all there, because you're playing as a part that's unhappy with their drug use. You always have to go to that part. You always have to play this core battle between, I love this. I need this stuff. I don't love it necessarily. Someone say I hate it, but I need it and I want it. And the person goes, I'm frightened. I want something different. You always go back to that. Some people in treatment are afraid to let the part speak that wants the drugs. In the old days that was forbidden, but now people are learning that's very important. That part gets into the room. It has to be has a central chair as a central player. The next level would be moderation. This is what I talked about before, a real structured approach to use that you're agreeing to. And the last one would be just cessation. I'm not going to use.
So we've got multiple steps here. And this is
multiple options. I would say there's steps, more like options.
Okay, options. I like it. This sounds like a journey of a lifetime, right? And it sounds like you can make progress, but you can also have that progress interrupted, right? It's not linear, although these steps have been laid out linearly in this conversation. I would imagine this work could take years, could take decades, could take a lifetime, right?
Well, 2 things. So for my personal goal, what I've written about is my goal is what I call like freedom or liberation. That is, I want people to not be addicted in their use. Addiction means slavery in the ancient, I don't know if in Latin or whatever. Addictus means a slave. So I want them to be not. So whatever they use, they're using what I call non-addictive use, which maybe is moderation, maybe it's a different pattern. Or the cessation. That's my goal for them. Is they're not, they have the freedom to use or not use, whatever that means. So I do have a goal. Now, something I didn't tell you before. So all this is great, but when something goes wrong, now we went back to Alan Marlatt. So we set a goal and it didn't work out. You weren't able to do it. So let's really take that apart. And then we find what I call the horizontal and the vertical, right? So this work is really based on horizontal and vertical work. Horizontal is managing substances, high-risk situations, dealing with triggers, dealing with cravings, dealing with urges, patterns of use, really becoming a scientist about your use. The vertical is trauma and self-hatred. You go into depression, anxiety, pain that's driving it. And for many people, they'll say, I'm not touching the substances until we deal with the pain, because that is my medicine. In the old days, we'd say, stop your drug use first, then we'll deal with your pain. Not considered to be that successful a strategy. I'm for the world of like either we deal with them both, or maybe we deal with the pain first and try to keep you alive, and then we'll deal with your drugs later on. And that's been kind of the revolution of, and people use drugs filled with self-hatred. Self-hatred is a precursor and self-hatred as a result of their drug use.
Life is too short not to work on solving cool problems with interesting people, and recruiting allows us to do both. I'm Brando, host of the Rebel TA podcast, a show where we share stories with people and talent leaders who are on a mission to empower the candidate-employer relationship in the future of work.
Well, I'm not surprised to hear about that. But so we've talked about kind of the horizontal management, which is a full-time job, right? I mean, this is really time consuming. It's involved to be like, as you described it, a scientist of your own life, of your own behaviors, of your own habits. But then to do the deep work around your identity as it stands and why it stands today. And some people that would trigger them into drinking, into using, into going back to the habits that they're trying to avoid in the first place. So I'm almost overwhelmed by the immense amount of work that it takes to live a life with integrity if you're suffering from addiction. I don't know. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think it's more complicated in the explanation than in the reality, because it's what does triggering mean? Triggering means a part of me got activated and my inner leader did not get it under control, right? I got taken over by a part because what Freud called the ego, I call the inner leader. That's of all psychotherapy, whatever it is, that's the goal of all psychotherapy, right? And we are all wrestling with our parts, and none of us are. I don't think any of us are in great control of our parts, but we kind of, we go, what did I do? I can't believe I did that. We're all wrestling with that, but with addiction, it's more extreme, And for some people, it's like, when you deal with the pain, the drug just goes away. Some people, that's not going to be the case. So, as one of our colleagues said, sometimes the drug use becomes, unmoored from the pain. It started with the pain, but now it has a life of its own. Contingency management is giving positive reinforcements for people to change, either to not use substances or to change their pattern. So what do I like to do? So I set this big goal with the patient. So they get 35 drinks a week. I say, if you drink 35 or less, I will take $10 off your fee.
All right. Okay.
This is the single most powerful method for getting people to change their behavior. It is more powerful than anything else. There's thousands of studies. It is unbelievably effective. It's better. There's so much opposition. So few people use this. I'm the only person I know who uses it in private practice. The VA is using it now in the VA system. But it is so incredibly useful.
Why?
I think, Skinner, in a very classic behavior study, would say, drugs are in Marlatt will also say, drugs are a reinforcer. We're now creating a counter reinforcer for change. So it's one reinforcer versus another, right? And people who are very poor, and many of them are, $10 is a lot of money. But I also think in my work, it also works on a relational and symbolic way, as well as the fact that everybody likes money. Everybody likes money. Money's powerful. You think wealthy people don't respond to $10? They respond to $10.
No, I believe that. And they're the most motivated to keep their money. That's how they stay wealthy. Yeah.
But it becomes like a game, and it's like a victory. You can also do the other side, which I used to do. I do it less now. It's kind of like, and if you do use more, I'm going to charge you $25 more. Kind of a downside. But I prefer not to do that. But I will if I feel like it's necessary.
For someone out there who things have gotten a little bit worse for them during COVID, but they're still showing up to work. They're still, for all intents and purposes, doing what they need to get done. But they do have this deep despair or this deep sadness, or just they're wrestling with trauma, right? And these are the conversations that start to come out in the dark hours of conferences, when you're sitting around with someone in Las Vegas right now. I mean, you start to hear their story, and deeply problematic and filled with a lot of self-hate, to your earlier point in the conversation. What does a responsible colleague do with that? You hear your friend is suffering. Where do you go with that?
Well, first thing to say, the job is for most middle-class people, I would say, maybe middle-class people, the job is the last thing to go. So, and I remember the Partnership for Drug-Free America, which is a controversial group. They had an advertisement saying like the boss is the greatest motivator to get recovery. Some advertisement campaign. But
the boss is the greatest motivator to cause you to have problems these days.
And also, people won't do it for their family, but they will do it for their job. They will actually get help. What do you say? I guess I would say to someone, it sounds like you are hurting a lot and you are in a lot of pain. And I would suggest that you get help for this pain as soon as possible. And I would suggest to go the pain route and not the drug route. I think people are you sound like you're depressed. You sound like the stuff is really bothering you. It sounds like you are really anxious. It's like maybe having some panic attacks. I really feel you're suffering. I think you should go talk to someone about this suffering and this pain. Not, because if we look at the drug and alcohol use as a way of managing the pain, right? That some ways maybe is not the best way to go into it. Better to say, I feel for your pain. That seems much more empathic to somebody. Now, the problem is in the field. The field's been divided between those in mental health and those in addiction. And some mental health people say, you're drinking too much, you got to go to addiction. Some addiction people say, look, I know you've got all this trauma, I can't treat you. So that may be a problem accessing some treatment that will work, but the world's getting better, so we can hope for that. I would say talk about the pain, don't talk about the drinking and alcohol. Unless something dramatic happens at work, right? There's some incredibly embarrassing thing, then you go, guy, I think I love you, but you almost got fired for that one. I think you're giving us a signal that this is really out of control for you. And and then in that case, I would go for the alcohol. And I've had patients who did really embarrassing things at parties.
Oh, wait, you got a story?
No.
You do have a story. You have hundreds of stories.
I'm sorry. I'm going to share it. Put it that way.
Well, Scott, that's all right. I like how bright red you're turning, though. I think that's lovely. And I'm so grateful. I learned a lot today in the conversation, especially about identity as it relates to addiction. And I want to thank you for being a guest today. We're going to put all of your good stuff in the show notes. The Corporate Drinker Podcast is a special series brought to you by Punk Rock HR. If you like what you heard, head on over to your favorite streaming platform and leave a 5-star rating and a review. You can also head on over to punkrocktr.com for news, information, show notes, and all the good stuff related to Corporate Drinker. This episode was expertly produced and edited by my friends at Emerald City Productions with special help from Danny and Michael. That's it for today's show. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next time on the Corporate Drinker Podcast.